Joining us today for our strategies and overview of the Strong Interest Inventory Assessment webinar. My name is Kim Rivera, and I'm the Associate Marketing Manager here at CPP. I'll be moderating today's webinar. Today's webinar will run for approximately 90 minutes. During the presentation, if you have any questions, please submit them to me using the question function in the webinar controls. Cheryl will be pausing throughout the webinar today to answer your questions. Representatives from CPP's education team are also in attendance, Jack Powers and Zinnia Mitchell. They'll be available to answer your questions as well. As with all of our webinars, today is being recorded and we'll be sending out a link to the recording in the next few days. Please note that the PowerPoint slides are not available for our Ask an Expert series. Okay, it is time for our contest. We have a special giveaway this time, which is CPP's newest ebook, Cycles of Success, a guide to career development and assessment insights. We've printed a very limited quantity, and I'm giving away 5 to the top 5 tweeters today. Here are the rules. Follow @CPP Education. Use hashtag CPPAAE in all tweets, as this is how we track your tweets. Share relevant and quality content, and have fun. The contest will end today at 1 p.m. Pacific time or 4 p.m. Eastern, and the winners will be announced through Twitter. Now, I'm very happy to welcome CPP's Ask an Expert, Cheryl Hollis-Wisely. Cheryl is the lead trainer for GS Consultants and provides certification training in the Strong Interest Inventory Assessment. She also facilitates workshops focused on the Strong and/or MBTI assessments. Cheryl teaches both online and on-site at various colleges and university campuses and for organizations and government agencies all over the U.S. She has used the Strong assessment for more than 20 years and is also an MBTI master practitioner. So please join me in welcoming Cheryl as I turn over the webinar to her. Welcome, Cheryl.
Thanks so much. Hello, everybody, and thanks to Kim and everyone at CPP for providing this webinar and all the technical support so that I can do this. Really appreciate it. So today we're going to be doing an overview of the Strong. We're going to look at the different scales, not in depth, but I'm going to give you a nice broad overview of them. I'm going to discuss some interpretation basics as well as some general applications. I'm also going to be looking at the different Strong report options that you can generate as a practitioner. And I'm also going to overview the iStartStrong report, which is the newest of the Strong reports, since some of you might not be familiar with that yet. As Kim mentioned, we're going to have a couple times we will break for questions. Like any career assessment, the Strong can't do it all by itself. It has to be part of a larger framework of career counseling and advising. Most of us use a career exploration framework that looks something like this. We help our clients and students to take stock of themselves, to assess their personality, their interests, their values, and their skills. We help them to identify career and training options. We help them to generate possibilities and to test them out. And we teach them often how to even make decisions. What we have to keep in mind and keep reminding our clients is that career assessments don't provide answers. They provide us, the career practitioners, with the tools to generate meaningful questions to guide the career development process of our clients. Remember that interpreting career assessments is as much an art as it is a science. What sets the Strong apart from other interest inventory assessments is that it was first developed during the 1920s with the empirical research of E.K. Strong. That very first Strong had over 400 questions that compared you with men only in 10 occupations. Many of us remember the Strong as the Strong Campbell. Even though Campbell hasn't been involved with the Strong since the 1980s, John Campbell's contribution was so major that the instrument is still often accidentally referred to as the Strong Campbell. Remember, the Strong has been around a long time, and over the years it has been revised frequently. John Holland's theory of vocational psychology, which is the RIASEC, or some people say RIASEC, it's kind of like potato, potato. I say RIASEC. That framework of Hexagon was added to the Strong in the 1970s, and I'm going to talk more about that in just a little bit. The Strong Interest Inventory continues to be the only empirically derived RIASEC instrument. But the original scales of the Strong, the occupational scales, are still the heart of the Strong. The Strong can be used in many different settings. In high schools, the Strong is used to encourage self-exploration and to introduce students to an easy system for exploring personalities and the world of work. In higher ed, it is used to find a good fit between person and career, starting with choosing college majors. And the Strong is used with adults who are exploring career transition, career enrichment, career disengagement, and just work-life balance. Unfortunately, many people just associate the Strong with initial career choice, which is really too bad. The Strong is just as effective with adult clients. It simply requires different interpretation strategies. And the Strong works very well with the MBTI. The two assessments address different aspects of the career development process. I call them the perfect yin-yang. Let's talk a little bit about the framework of the Strong. The Strong is based on John Holland's RIASEC theory of vocational psychology. And this theory has been used in career development since the 1950s. This is how it goes. There are 6 basic categories of personality. There are 6 corresponding categories of work environment. And John Holland was all about person-environment fit. Most people and work environments are a combination of categories. In the world of work, people are naturally searching for people who are similar to them. I like to say it's about finding your people, and the Strong helps us do just that. And here's Holland's hexagon. The 6 personality and work environment categories are arranged in a particular order around the hexagon. I'm going to introduce and summarize these categories briefly for you now. We'll start at the top. R stands for realistic. These are the doers. Realistic people are hands-on and physical. Realistic work environments are also hands-on and physical, often involving large equipment or the outdoors. I stands for investigative, and these are the thinkers. Investigative people are problem-focused and analytical. Investigative work environments are often scientific and research-oriented. A stands for artistic. These are the creators. Artistic people are creative and sensitive. Artistic work environments encourage independence and self-expression. S stands for social, and these are the helpers. Social people are helpful and friendly. Social work environments are cooperative and collaborative. E is enterprising, and these are the persuaders. Enterprising people are verbal and persuasive. E work environments are fast-paced and businesslike. And the final theme is C for conventional. These are the organizers. Conventional people are organized and detail-oriented, and conventional work environments involve gathering and organizing information. Holland's theory says that the categories next to each other have overlapping characteristics, so they naturally share qualities in common. For example, R and I, they touch, and they naturally are going to have some common space between them. And the categories that are opposite, like C and A, they have very, very different and share very, very little in common. Most personalities and work environments are made up of 2 or 3, usually adjoining letters. Let's look at the scales of the Strong. What makes the strong more complex than simpler RIASEC instruments, and what qualifies it as a restricted psychological assessment, is the process of fitting the different types of scales together, especially when the themes aren't consistent across the scales. So there are 3 scales on the strong that use the RIASEC coding. They are the 6 general occupational themes, the 30 basic interest scales, and the 130 occupational scales. There are also 5 scales on the strong that are not RIASEC coded, and these describe respondent style of working and learning. Those are called the personal style scales. And then lastly, there are several administrative indexes that are for use by the career practitioner that do not use the RIASEC scales. I'm going to walk you through each of these scales in just a bit. A little bit about how the scales are created. On the general themes, on the basic interests, and on the personal style scales, respondents' answers are compared with those of people in general. It's called a general representative sample, and it's made up of employed adults. Scores on these scales tell us how much interest respondents have compared to men and women in general in these areas. However, on the occupational scales, respondents' answers are compared with actual occupational groups. Here, the scores tell us how similar respondents are to workers who are typical of various occupations. It is because the norm groups are different that it is quite possible for respondents to come up with general theme and basic interest coding that is different from their top occupations. And our work as practitioners involves looking for patterns and the consistency of the RIASEC coding across the scales. So we interpret the scales one at a time, but then we have to use them all together and look at the consistencies and the inconsistencies and help the client to make sense of that. The most common form of the strong is the profile, accompanied by an optional report. This slide is a picture of the profile plus the interpretive report. The interpretive report is used to deepen the take-home information for the client. But there are other report forms as well. One is a special set of pages for high school students. Another are profile pages for college students who are exploring various majors. And there's also a career report that combines the strong with the Myers-Briggs. Let's go into the regular strong profile now, and we will work our way through the scales. Again, feel free to send in your questions as they pop up, because we will be stopping in a bit for the first round of questions. Here we are in the profile on page 3. The first thing that the profile gives us are the general occupational themes. You can see the 6 themes from the hexagon listed down the side on the left. These are listed in the respondent's order of strength. So this particular individual, female, artistic was her highest, all the way down to realistic was the theme she had the least in common with. There's a lot of information here to help us with the interpretation about interests, work activities, potential skills, and values as they relate to each theme. There's also an interpretive booklet to use during interpretations with the client that goes along with the strong, and it expands on these themes even further. The booklet is called Where Do I Go Next? I'll be using it a bit today, and I'll give you more information about that at the end of the webinar. Let's look at the bottom half of page 3. This is what it looks like. It's a bar graph that provides a lot of data and is very visual. The scores here on the right compare the respondents to people in general, both men and women. These are standard scores, not percentiles. On the strong, 50 is the average standard score. So we can see for this individual, her A theme, artistic, and her S theme, social, have really high numbers. Just to put it in perspective, a score of 70 on the artistic theme is actually at the 96th percentile. The words on the bars that you see, very high, high, moderate, she has no little, but she has a very little, that interprets the scores against the respondent's identified gender. So for her, compared to women, her interest in artistic theme is considered very high, whereas her interest in the realistic theme, there at the bottom, is considered very little. It's important to work with the client to make sure that they understand what the themes mean, and not just their understanding of what a word means. For example, S for social, a lot of people think it means talkative or outgoing. Using Where Do I Go Next, I'm going to flip to the social theme page, and I'm just going to share with you a few things on how we can clarify with the client what the themes mean. Social people describe themselves as caring, helpful, kind, generous, friendly, patient, words like that. Social people are motivated by helping others, instructing others, empowering, and they value things like cooperation, community, trust, others' welfare, etc. So you can see here that the social theme, as defined by the Strong, has nothing to do with being outgoing. After the social theme, we come to the basic interest scales. This is on page 4. These themes of page 3 are followed by 30 basic interests. And here we narrow down the general themes into very specific areas. They might be related to work, but they also can be related to school, to leisure, to volunteering, to hobbies. It's very important that the client understands that the basic interest scales are about interests that could appear in all areas of their life. The top of page 4 isolates for you your top 5 interests of the 30, and it also gives you your lowest 3 interests of the 30. Note here that the top 5 basic interests have artistic and social themes. These happen to be the same themes as this individual's highest general themes from the previous slide. And you might remember from the previous slide, her lowest of the 6 themes was realistic. And look what we have here. Her areas of least interest are all in the realistic code. The top 5 are set apart on that previous slide, but all 30 are represented at the bottom of page 4, once again in a bar graph like this. The layout is as it was for the general themes. Scores are based on how often the respondent said strongly like, dislike, or strongly dislike to the items on the scale. Once again, the basic interests measure very narrow interest areas. These are not job titles, but they are interests. So for example, we see that she has law is one of her higher interests there in the enterprising section there in the lower left column. It doesn't mean that she has to be a lawyer. It doesn't mean that she might even necessarily be interested in law in terms of a career. But when she took the Strong, she said that she liked and strongly liked the questions that put points on the law scale. For her, law might be something that she just enjoys intellectually, or she might enjoy TV shows that are legal-based, or books like John Grisham. The interests can appear in all areas of our life. We see again the standard scores along the right-hand side, which compare the respondent to men and women in the general population. And then again, the interpretive comments, or the words on the bar, interpret her scores against the identified gender of the client. The interpretation process with the client helps them identify if these top interests might be areas that they want to explore in terms of a major, in terms of a career, or perhaps it might be more hobby or leisure. One of her top interests is visual arts and design. She has a standard score of 68. It's up there on the artistic section. Using Where Do I Go Next, I want to just explain to you how we would use this booklet to help them interpret the basic interests. For example, there's a brief definition. Visual arts and design It says, this area represents interest in visual creativity and spatial visualization. I might enjoy learning about architecture, photography, technical illustrating, drawing. I might like to work in an architectural firm, a photography studio, a commercial art firm. In leisure, I might enjoy spending my time with photography, sketching, painting, collecting artwork, going to museums or art galleries. So the interpretation of how the basic interests show up in their life is something that we guide them through. All right.
Okay,
Kim,
Cheryl,
want to turn this over to you?
Yeah, we have a handful of questions that have come through, and I'll start with John's. He asked, is there a second career strong for those over 65 and those who have retired and are looking for a new career?
The strong is great for all ages and up through even retirement. The youngest you'd want to use the strong with is no younger than 8th grade. There's no research on the reliability and validity of anyone younger than 8th grade. But on the other end of the lifespan, the strong can be used forever. Using the basic interest, the scale we just looked at, that is a great scale, especially to look at retirement, what comes next, whether it's volunteering, part-time work, hobbies, leisure, work-life balance. It tells us what we like. It tells us what we enjoy. So that's really good information because it's like taking your temperature right now in terms of what compels you. So there's no additional strong, but we retake the strong anytime we're at a crossroads or even have a separate set of questions about what comes next.
All right, and we have a question from Denise. Where are the social themes defined in the report?
The report itself has a brief synopsis of all the themes is on the first half of page 3. So the first half of the general occupational scale page has some examples of what social looks like. If you want to actually get a good definition of the strong, you're going to want to use the Where Do I Go Next booklet or the user guide. And I'll show you a slide at the end of the program that lets you see what those look like. But these can be ordered through CPP. And they're kind of, for me, I'm never at an interpretation without them. Don't leave home without them. Because they give all the empirically based anecdotal words we can use so that we're just not making things up to explain the themes. But we're actually using the words that the strong is measuring. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, okay. And a question from Barbara. Are there only 30 BIS to draw from, or are there many and the assessment just takes the top 30?
Great question. The strong only looks at 30 specific basic interest scales. And all of us who take the strong are getting our answers compared to those 30. And they're all sorted into the same theme. So example, on my report, the basic interests that have an S or a social theme are also going to have an S or a social theme on your report. But how we score on them and the interpretive comments that we get on them are going to be very different person to person. But the great thing about the 30 basic interests that have been chosen is that they do represent the whole hexagon of interests. It's impossible, of course, to measure every interest, but the strong does a great job of isolating 30 that represent the whole hexagon.
All right, and I'll ask one more question, and I know there's many more coming through, and we will get to those. But I have a question from Shari. Do you recommend using the combined strong/MBTI career report after the initial strong report, or does the combined report include the entire strong profile within it? And if you know, or you could definitely call on Jack or Zinnia if you need to on that one.
Yeah, I'll just say something quick, and then I'll have Jack and Zinnia respond as well. The important thing about that combined career report is you have to use verified type. Otherwise, you're getting an analysis of the two instruments together that is not particularly meaningful. So there are steps that you want to do in order to get the most bang for the buck out of that report. Jack and Zinnia?
Yeah, I would just add that there's often some confusion around the Strong and MBTI career report, also referred to as the combined report. It is a third report that's generated in addition to the Strong profile or the Strong college profile. And like you said, Cheryl, you do also have to have verified MBTI type to feed into the combined report. So in cases where you already have MBTI, the verified type, you would not have to administer the MBTI or run another report. But in those scenarios where you do not already have verified type, you would also need to factor in an MBTI report on top of the Strong profile or the Strong college profile.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I think we'll move on to keep the webinar going, and we will stop for questions in just a bit.
Okay, great. Thanks. We're going to move on to the occupational scales next. The occupational scales change gears entirely. Instead of being compared to people in general, you are now being compared to actual workers in 130 different occupations. And these are workers who like their work and do their jobs in a typical way for that occupation. That's very important because when I say to somebody that you are similar to an accountant, I need to know that that's accurate, that that's true, that they are similar to people who are doing accounting in a typical way. For example, middle school teacher. The middle school teachers who were invited to be in that norm group for middle school teachers all do their work in a typical way. They are all in a middle school, in a public or private setting. You're not going to find middle school teachers who are maybe in a residential youth treatment center, or middle school teachers who do homebound teaching or chronic hospital illness teaching. So it's doing their work in a typical way. And the occupational scales give us emerging themes and patterns. This is where we're going to again use the art of the strong as well as the science of the strong that suggest potentially satisfying work environments. I want to emphasize this. The primary value of the occupational scales is not any one job title that appears on the client's list. It is the overall coding of the respondents' occupations. So keep in mind that work environments are formed by the people who are in them, not by the work that is done. Holland's RIASEC theory is a theory of personalities in work environments, not a theory of personalities in jobs. So if you have a data entry department where all of the workers are artistic, you have an artistic work environment. And you can just tell by looking around at what they're wearing, at what they have on their desks, on their computer displays. We're not saying this is a happy work environment, but if you have an artistic student who is looking for a job in data entry, you want to talk to them about work environments. Page 5 of the profile lists the respondents' top 10 and bottom 5 occupational scales. Now this is out of 130. The respondent, as you know, has ASE as the top themes, and that pattern is emerging here again. Notice how often A, S, and E are showing up on her top 10 occupations. Scores come from how often respondents answered the items on the scale in the same way as the occupational group. So we're not just getting likes here, but we're getting matches on likes, indifference, and dislikes. What that means is when you took the strong, if you said you liked the same questions that career counselors liked, you just got a point on the career counselor scale. If you disliked the same things that career counselors disliked, you just got a point on the career counselor scale. And the same for indifference. Pretty cool. Because these scales are empirically developed, they cannot be faked. When respondents come up with lots of high occupations in a certain theme code, that really means something. And when the code is consistent with their general theme and their basic interest themes, it says something very important. Not only does this client like things that are associated with artistic and social themes like writing, mass communication, teaching, and education, but she is also similar to satisfied workers in related occupations. That is a huge bingo. We can see the thematic overlap here between her highest interests. They have to do with teaching, writing, the arts, and we're seeing that thematically represented in her top 10 as well. And notice that the top 10 are blue. Those are hyperlinked, and they go right into ONET, which is Occupational Network, when you click on them. What that means is after the interpretation session, you want to make sure the PDF of the report gets sent to your client so they can benefit from those hyperlinks. The occupational scales go through pages 6 through 8, and again, there are 130 of them sorted into theme groups. Scores of 40 and over are significant, and they indicate more similarity to workers in the occupation than is likely to happen by chance. Scores of 50 and higher mean you are very similar to people in those occupations. Here we have the artistic themed ones. You can see the theme codes on the left. The job titles come next, and then a visual bar length that depicts the standard score. Scores of 40 and above, you are similar to those people. 50 and above, you are very similar to those people. And the great thing about the strong is to remember that these are just gateways to ideas. The strong is about expanding options. It's not about limiting job titles. So for example, Public Relations Director, her one right there at the top, if you go into Occupational Network and learn more about it and scroll down to the related job titles, you're going to come across titles like Campaign Manager, Community Relations Director, Information Services Director, Marketing Manager, Public Affairs Manager, etc. These titles are just a starting place. They're not the ending place. You might remember that realistic was our client's number 6 theme in her general theme page. Look at the realistic jobs here. She has no similarity at all to people in these occupations. And look, she's even got a negative 27 score on athletic trainer there at the bottom. Basically, that means she took the strong opposite of athletic trainers. She liked something, they disliked it. She disliked something, they liked it. All right? So we're getting the full range of who we're similar to and who we are least similar to. The general occupational themes describe you as a person or your personality. The basic interest scales describe specific things that you like to do. When the general themes and the basic interests line up, it indicates readiness for career decision making. The person we've been looking at, her scores are definitely lining up. And I would say for her, next steps are career exploration. Things like informational interviews, job shadows. She's ready to make a decision. If all 3 of the scales line up, it is even more powerful. The basic interest scales, as I've said, are what you like. Taken by themselves, they give us some really good information for choosing college majors, for example. The occupational scales, as you know now, give us similarity to actual workers. Taken by themselves, they suggest what we might like if we knew about it. When they all line up, it's like a double bingo. You like something and you're similar to workers in that field. You are much more likely to enter a career field where you like the content of the field and you are similar to workers who are satisfied with their work. All right, next come the personal style scales and then the administrative indexes, and we'll stop for more questions. If you're squinting too hard here, this is what page 9 at the top of, at the bottom of the profile page looks like. I will explain all of these to you. But in general, the personal style scales describe how we like to work and learn compared to men and women in general. Here is a bipolar scale. All scores are meaningful. There's no high and low anymore. We speak in terms of right and left and middle. Scores above 54 usually identify with descriptors on the right. Scores below 46 usually identify with descriptors on the left. So that makes 46 to 54 the mid-range, and that suggests that you identify with some of each end of this bipolar scale. This particular individual does not have anything in the mid-range, but that would indicate a flexibility or a bit of both ends. So let's take a look at them. We'll just start at the top here with work style scale. This scale really looks at in a workday, how many hours roughly do you want to spend in direct people contact? That's the gist of it. A diamond that pulls to the right indicates somebody who really wants a lot of direct people contact during the workday, and a diamond to the left is somebody who's going to prefer more to be internal in their own heads, thinking, planning, doing analysis, doing forecasting, etc. And a diamond in the middle indicates something in the middle. This person wants to work with people a lot. That standard score of 74 is huge. All right, this slide has the next two scales on it. Learning environment is across the top, and leadership is across the bottom. I'll take them one at a time. The learning environment scale suggests learning environments that will be potentially productive and satisfying for you. A diamond to the right are people who prefer more traditional liberal arts type learning. They like theory, research, lectures, papers, and they're really willing to spend lots of years in school and learning just for the sake of learning. A diamond that pulls to the left are individuals who are excited about applied learning, learning they can use, especially learning they can use professionally. It also might be tactile learning, learning that they can touch and they can do as they're learning. A diamond in the middle would be a bit of both. So for example, a major that has an internship, that would be great mid-range learning environment. We need to be very careful about stereotyping. We cannot assume all professional technical programs, for example, are on the left, or all PhD programs are on the right. And of course, this scale is not about capacity to learn. It's about how you like to learn the best. Dentists, MBAs, those are some high-level professional positions that often tend to pull left. Psychologists are a profession that often tends to pull right. And school counselors tend to end up in the middle. They really like learning that they can apply. And the lower section is leadership. The leadership personal style scale looks at a take charge kind of leadership. So to the right is more about people management and directly initiating and motivating and directing others. A diamond that pulls to the left is somebody who prefers more to lead by example, or maybe they like project management, or maybe they don't want to lead at all. And a diamond in the middle is going to be situational management, situational leadership. And the last two personal style scales are on this slide. We have risk-taking at the top, and we have team orientation at the bottom. Risk-taking looks at primarily three different kinds of risk: physical, financial, and relational. Physical risk are going to be the adrenaline activities, adrenaline sports, bungee jumping, or think about, there are many jobs that have quite a bit of physical risk attached to them, EMTs, firefighters, etc. Financial risk, that's going to be things like you enjoy working on commission, or you enjoy investing, or more entrepreneurial startup sorts of endeavors. And relational risk, these are things like traveling to new places, new peoples, new cultures. And it's interesting with the relational risk, people who think that's fun, they don't realize that that can feel risky to other people. So a diamond to the left, really no interest in any of these risks. A diamond in the middle is typically one of the risks you're comfortable with, and a diamond to the right would be all of the above. And then team orientation. The question that separates this one from the work style scale, which was more about the number of direct people contact hours in a day, team orientation is when on a team, how do you like to contribute? So a diamond to the right are people who really enjoy the collaborative team process. They even might want to have their project that they're assigned to do that with other people. A diamond to the left are people who prefer to be independent contributors. They want to go to the team meeting, get their assignment, go off and do it, and then bring back their completed assignment at the next team meeting. All right, so that's an overview of the 5 personal style scales. The last page of the regular profile is the profile summary. This includes some administrative indices as well as an overview of the patterns that have emerged. So the top half looks like this. It's a bird's eye view of the whole results, and we can see A, S, and E screaming out at us throughout her results. And the lower half looks at the how reliable and typical the individual was in terms of the strong. Because the strong compares you with general people, you want to make sure that your client was considered typical enough that the strong was the right instrument for them. So for example, the items omitted, this person had 0. You can omit up to 15 and still have a report generated. And the typicality index must be at least 17. We want these indexes to be in the normal range, which they are for this individual. And if they're not, we do have to adjust interpretation strategies. This lower half of the page is actually where you look before you prepare or as you're preparing for an interpretation. All right, we're ready for some more questions.
Yes, and we have quite a few coming through. So I will try to get through as many on this about 5-minute question break and then hold the rest for the end of the webinar. I'll start with a question from Barbara. In private practice, many parents try to peg their children to a particular major by having their child take the strong. Since we cannot be interested in things we do not know, how can we say the strong is valid for high schoolers, especially since it is an indication of where the student is now?
Yeah, great question. It depends on the student, because some students, what they do not know, they say indifferent. Other students say they dislike things that they don't know. And by looking, I'm just going to pop back here again. By looking at this screen, we can see that line called total percentage. And that's where we're going to be able to get a glimpse of the mindset of the individual who took the strong. So if they said indifferent a lot, I'm going to get curious about that, and I'm going to ask them, tell me a bit about when you took the strong. I noticed that you said indifferent a lot, and I'm going to learn that I don't really know much. Or they might say, oh, I didn't even understand the question. Or they might have said dislike a lot. So I'm going to ask that same question. And the thing is, that is valid information, because if they're indifferent because they don't know much, then my homework with them is not to choose a major right away, and anyway, that needs to wait until college, but it's to help them explore the world of work. Knowledge is power with the strong. The more they know about the hexagon and the corners of the hexagon, the better they're going to have in terms of differentiated results on the strong. So it is completely valid with high school. And saying indifferent a lot or dislike a lot or like a lot, those are all valid places to be in the world. But it's through the interpretation that we learn more what's going on.
All right, thank you. A question from Kathleen. Can you please explain typicality?
Yeah. I know I popped over that very quickly, but typicality, it wants to make sure you took the strong in a way that is typical for the norm groups that you're being compared to. The highest score you can get is 24, and what that means is that there's been 24 pairs that have been set up within the instrument, and they're the same pairing for everybody, to see if you're answering in what's considered a typical way. So for example, I'm not privy to all the pairings, and I don't even know that Jack or Zinnia are, but an example of one might be how you feel about numbers and how you feel about accountants. So if I say that I said like or strongly like to being an accountant or hanging out with an accountant, I would also expect it to say like or strongly like to liking numbers. Or I would say dislike to both of those. When you answer the affirmative on one and the negative on the other, you just lose a point on typicality. So you get a point a pair. So there's 24 pairs that you're being evaluated on maximum. And again, on this slide here, the typicality needs to be at least 17 for you to be considered typical compared to the norm groups that are being used.
Okay, thank you. A question from Leonor. For the risk-taking scale, how do you differentiate between the type of risk? Risk in one aspect, such as physical risk, does not necessarily mean a person will take financial risk.
Great. So I'm going to look at where that diamond falls. If there's a diamond in the middle, I know it's going to be probably one of those risk forms that they're comfortable with. So I'm going to ask, and I'll explain. This scale on the strong compares you to 3 kinds of risks, and I'll explain what they are, and I'll say which of them is the one that sounds like you connect with. Or if the diamond's on the right, I'll check in and see if they indeed connect with 2 or 3 of them. And the reason I want to know which one is because that's going to move us forward in terms of the career exploration or choosing a major process. If somebody has a very right-pulled diamond, they need juice. They are probably going to get bored easily. And so whether they're looking at extracurricular activities that have a lot of adrenaline in them, or actual majors or careers that have that natural, is it commission, is it physical risk, is it like a competition sort of environment, I need to make sure that there's enough risk involved in whatever it is they're doing so that it fits them. The client always has the answers. We get to ask the questions.
Okay, a question from Denise. Do the personal styles tend to change over time or with life experiences?
Yeah, they do. The strong is like taking your temperature. It's where you are right now. And so things do change. For example, if you've never had an opportunity to do leadership, your leadership diamond might be more pulled left than we might expect for an individual. So I might ask about that. Or you might have had really bad leadership experience in the past and been burned by the politics of it. And in the past, your leadership was pulled right, and now it's pulled left. And so that's why the strong we take any time we're at a juncture. It's a way of checking in with ourselves in terms of who we are, the aspects of our personality that are leading us, the interests in our life that are compelling us the most, the people we are most similar to. So it really is something that is about the space we're in right now.
I'll ask one more question, and then we will save the rest for the end of the webinar. A question from Maureen. What would you recommend a career counselor do when the typicality rate is not above 17? Do you dismiss the results altogether? Could that mean that there may be a deeper issue with the client?
Yeah, so what happens anytime anything seems a little bit wonky or out of bounds, I guess is more the technical term, we still use the strong to figure out what's going on. So my question is, in my head, if the typicality is 16 or 15, which, you know, I haven't really seen a whole lot, maybe just a handful of times in 20 years, I'd bring my curiosity to the session. I might not say to them, why are you atypical? But I'm certainly going to be on the lookout for what makes them unique. You know, for example, maybe they're a realistic themed female. Maybe they're a female who grew up in a military family. Or maybe it's a social themed male. So sometimes marching to the beat of a different drummer in our culture makes us atypical. It could be that they didn't understand some of the questions. Or it could be that they very clearly understand, I really like numbers, I do not want to be an accountant. And for them, that is not a conflict. So it is something I'm going to talk about, but it's more I'm also going to just be on the lookout for. Is that good?
Yeah, we'll move on, and there definitely is a lot of questions coming through that we'll hold till the end of the webinar.
Okay. Well, we're just going to next go through very quickly some of the different report options. And then we're going to leave about 10 minutes for questions and answers at the end of the webinar. So I hope everyone can hang with us. A brief walkthrough on these, and you can print out full report samples for each of these from the CPP website. I don't have the exact website, but I know it's cpp.com/sample reports. But it's really great. You can go in there and download all these versions. We'll start with the college profile. So this is what the general theme page of the college profile looks like. And again, these additional reports come after the regular profile that we've just walked through. So this takes your highest 3 themes from your general theme code. This is a different individual. His code is RIC. And then it takes the general themes and links them to college majors. This slide just shows the first one, the R, the doers, but then on the page underneath it, it would have the same for I and the same for C. But these are some college majors and programs of study. Some are tied to graduate programs. Some of these might require a graduate degree, like civil engineering perhaps. So it's a great way to use the who am I personality conversation to explore majors. And the second page of the college profile takes your 5 highest basic interest scales. And this, again, is just one of the 5, so they would all be underneath each other. But I love this page because it helps us explain ways to try on the ideas. Instead of just declaring a major as a way of exploring it, why not explore your interests through things like which campus organizations you might want to attend, join, activities, internships, job shadows, part-time work that you might want to try. College courses, that's a great way to try it out. It might end up just being an elective if you decide you didn't like it, but it's a much easier way to try a major by taking a class than by declaring a major. And then the occupational scale section of the college profile looks like this. This is 5 of the 10 that would be listed. In blue, again, hyperlinked directly into ONET, into Occupational Network. The theme codes of the occupations. And then I like this next column. This is the reality check column. How much schooling, what kind of a degree is going to be required in order to be that? College courses that you will need to enjoy and be proficient in. And then I love this last column is right away it takes that job title and expands. So instead of looking at engineering technician, we also have now 3 new ways of looking at that. Science technician, drafter, surveyor. Again, the strong is used to open up, not to narrow ideas. The personal style scales on the strong has a summary, and then it has a link to a PDF that's a worksheet that students can download to look at college majors and researching them. And when you pull that up, it's by Jeff Prince, and it's a worksheet that is great for homework. It's great to use in workshops and in classes with college students. So that's a bit about the college profile. You would use this profile for high school juniors and seniors who are college bound, 4-year or 2-year, and or into the college age, freshman, sophomore, undecided, undeclared. Once a college student has chosen a major, the college profile really isn't helpful. I would just use the standard report or the standard report and the interpretive report. We'll get to that one in just a little bit. Let's talk about the high school report. These pages do not include the occupational scales, and that's because developmentally high school students are learning about themselves. So the pertinent questions in high school is, who am I and what do I like? And so the high school profile pages really focus on those 2 specific questions. The general theme page in the high school profile looks like this. This person's code is ASE, and it links then the theme codes to educational ideas, volunteering, job possibilities, and what ASE work environments might look like. So it's very exploratory in nature. The personal style scales are summarized very succinctly on the high school profile. And then the basic interest pages look like this. This is 2 of the 5. And it uses the what do I like, what do I enjoy, and it translates that into ideas related to values on a job titles that are connected to these interests. These are not OSs, and these are not occupational scales, but they're jobs connected to the interests. and work activities that you might enjoy, since you said you liked these sorts of things. Okay. The interpretive report is the next one I want to look at. We usually use the interpretive report as a follow-up to the profile interpretation. So you don't go through this report at the interpretation, it's more of a take-home document. It's got some really unique features I want to point out to you. For example, this page. This is the only section of the Strong profile and any of the reports that suggests career fields based on the respondent's 2-letter theme code. So the general theme results takes the highest 2, and then it combines them and ties them then to career fields. So in this gray box, there are 6 ideas of fields where A and S themes are bound up together. This page and then this page I really like. This is the career motivator page. Again, using the highest 2 themes. Excuse me. This provides critical information for the career exploration process. This is almost like a compass about what is it that I want to be doing, or why do I want to work? Instead of it giving a specific name, you're going to be a career counselor. It's a reminder of the kind of work you want to do, and it clearly states what the motivations look like depending on how you flip them. So if we have A and S, that is described as using your creativity in friendly and helpful, etc. ways. But SA is I want to help others in original or imaginative ways with autonomy and independence. The interpretive report also has its own touches on the basic interests, and what it does is it adds typical interests and activities to the top 5 basic interests from the profile. So as of 2012, there's a new report called the iStartStrong, and it is an unrestricted report. Now what that means is it's a version of the Strong that is self-interpretable. The other report versions are restricted. I'm going to take that away for a sec. This is what a restricted report does. It has data, it has numbers, it has words that need to be interpreted by a career practitioner. That is why we cannot give the results to a client without them being at an interpretation with you. But an unrestricted report can be interpreted directly by the individual, and they can receive it without an interpretation. This is what the iStartStrong does. It only includes the 6 general themes and the 30 basic interests, but it has no scales and no numbers. It is primarily used by practitioners who do not have a background in counseling, or for large group administrations where one-on-one or smaller group interpretations are just not possible. For example, a large new student orientation event. This slide compares how the general themes are presented on each report. Many of you have not yet seen the iStart, so I want to do a little show and tell of it here. To get this report, respondents take the exact same Strong assessment that they take for the other reports, but it is only scored for the general occupational themes and the basic interest scales. Practitioners can later have results rescored for the occupational and personal style scales if they want the more in-depth information. The iStartStrong is especially useful in settings where full interpretations are not possible. The iStartStrong was designed for visual appeal, point-and-click access to more information. Everything's hyperlinked right off the PDF, and because of that, it makes it very interactive. So this one is Charlie College. We're going to look at a couple of his pages. So the report begins with a description of Charlie's top 2 themes and how they fit together to describe work environments. Realistic and investigative, you would probably like work environments where tangible products are developed and made. The top 2 themes are always presented So standard scores, little, moderate, high categories have all been completely eliminated. Next comes a description of people with these themes. He was RI, here are RI. Realistic people are doers. Investigative people are thinkers. So you can click to learn more. Respondents now are getting a picture of how people in work environments will fit together. And again, because they're viewing their PDFs online, the links go immediately to more information. Now we know there are 6 themes on the hexagon. It gives you the top 2 on one section, but it does also then give you the other 4. And that way they can get to know the other 4 themes and be familiar with the whole hexagon, not just their top 2. So that's how the general theme section looks. Of course, by clicking on Learning More, you get other screens and other slides. I don't have those up right now. Charlie's top 5 specific interests are listed next. You will recognize these as the basic interest scale. I'm going to show you what would happen if you were to click on that 5th one there, the one that says Programming and Information Systems. So clicking on that takes you to a different page. And each of the 5 interests will give you the same information. Once again, we have Programming and Information Systems. We get a description and the work tasks. We get areas of study, so ideas on programs of study and majors related to the interests. Career fields related to the interest. Job title examples that are related to this interest. These are not the occupational scales. These are occupations in ONET that are tied to Programming and Information Systems interests. And once again, all of those are hyperlinked into ONET. And activities that you might enjoy or are a great way to try out these interests. So that is a quick overview of the iStartStrong. A couple more things I'm going to show you here, and then I'm going to turn things back over to Kim. I mentioned to you the Where Do I Go Next booklet. That is a booklet that I use at all interpretations. Ideally, it's great to provide to the client, but regardless, it's a wonderful reference piece. It's also available in a PDF now. And then the Strong Interest Inventory User's Guide. This is the practitioner's Bible, booklet, go-to book for the regular profile. And for those of you who use the college profile a lot or who want to, you also want to get the Strong Interest Inventory User's Guide for the college profile. It is blue. The author of that is Jeffrey Prince, and all of these materials are available from CPP. But those are my go-to books. And then just a couple things I want to mention. Again, I do work for GS Consultants, and we do the online Strong certification program. So if you're interested in being certified in the Strong and want to do that online, I would be your instructor, and I do certify people all over the world online, so that's quite fun. I've currently got someone in Romania, someone in Dominican Republic, lots of good Canadians. And then in person, GS Consultants, every June, we do run an in-person training, and we're in Tahoe this year. It's a 3.5-day training, June 8th to the 11th. We are full, but we do have a wait list forming. If you're interested in that, you can contact us at gsconsultants.net for more information. And then we also offer online MBTI certification programs that are specially developed for educators and career counselors. So that's kind of our little niche in the world with the MBTI online certification. Thank you so much, and I'm going to turn it back over to Kim.
All right, thank you, Cheryl. I do have a few things to share, and then we'll open up the forum for questions that have been submitted. So we invite all of you to connect with us online. Make sure you follow us to keep up with the latest news, tips, and advice from our team of experts. Today, we are running a special promotion for our webinar attendees. If you spend $250 or more, you will receive a complimentary RIASEC Hexagon poster. Make sure to use the promo code AAE515, and the offer will expire Friday, May 29th. This is not valid on previous purchases with other promotional offers or international orders. It is one per customer, and please note when you place the order, your complimentary poster will ship separately from your purchases. If you are an international customer and would like more information on products and services, please go to cpp.com/global sales. And if you haven't done so already, please check your email preferences by visiting cpp.com/email-press. Many of you may not receive our webinar invitations or follow-up emails because you are unsubscribed in our system. This webinar is eligible for 1.5 NBCC approved CE clock hours. All certificates requests must or will incur a $7.95 plus tax processing fee. In order to qualify for this certificate, to purchase the certificate, you must meet the eligibility requirements noted on the screen. To be eligible, our system must show that you attended this live webinar for 1 hour or longer. The system automatically tracks attendees by email address and screen viewing time. If you are calling in and not viewing this on your screen, you will not be eligible, as our system does not track phone calls. So I'm going to go into some of these questions that have come through over the webinar. There's quite a few, so I will just start from the top here, Cheryl.
Okay.
All right. How is the Strong used or adapted with clients who resist gender identification? This question's coming from Linda.
Yeah, great question. And this will one of the future webinars that CPP will be providing in the coming academic year will be around challenging profiles and also unique client groups. So that will be something that we'll be looking at in more depth. But the nice thing about the Strong is that we can use the term identified gender, and for individuals who do not identify with a specific gender, or they might say that they're gender queer or gender neutral, that is fine, because we have the ability as practitioners at no additional cost to run the entire universe of possibilities on the report. So when I say that is they do need to pick a gender to start with the Strong. The Strong will not let you proceed into the assessment if you don't indicate a gender. But as a practitioner, when they're coming in to meet with me, I can run both report versions, both the male version and the female version at no additional cost. And then I have the entire universe of the results when they meet with me. So hopefully that will help.
Okay, thank you. And a question here from Mary. Where does the sample come from that the OSs are based on?
Well, they come from decades and decades and decades of research. There are 130 occupations, and so there are actually research groups of each of those 130 occupations that are male only and female only. So, for example, for librarian, there is a norm group of female librarians, and there is a norm group of male librarians. And those groups, those occupational samples are updated and researched and looked at and relooked at. Some are added, some are dropped, roughly about every 10 to 15 years. The last full revision was in 2012. So it's quite a complicated and expensive and time-consuming process, and the Strong is the only instrument out there that is dedicated to continually updating the occupational samples, which is pretty cool, I think. Jack or Zinnia, do you want to add anything to that about the occupational scales in terms of a bit of data about them?
No, I would just reiterate that CPP is dedicated to constantly revising and researching and updating those scales, and we were really excited to announce the update to the occupational scales in 2012. And of course, we are already working on revising them for the next go around.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, a question from Anne. Is there a report that only lists occupations that require college education?
No. No, because, yeah, I guess, I mean, if that's something you really wanted to do, you could look at the 130 occupations yourself and do a little research on which ones require a college education in the U.S. I know in Canada sometimes our degree requirements are different, but there isn't a single report that just narrows it that way.
All right, and Christine asks, what would you say about someone whose GOTs and BISs do not line up? Are there steps you can make to align them? Is this person not ready for career decision making?
Good question. The nice thing about the scales is that they all actually are looking at different topics. So it is totally possible to have the Who I Am scale, the personality, the GOT scale. Let's say it comes up, you know, with E and S as my top two themes. And my basic interests might be a lot of R things like athletics or mechanics and construction, and it might be a lot of I things like math and research. That really can happen, and it's a disconnect only in that the themes aren't conveniently lining up. So it's really through, again, the conversation that happens in the interpretation that we talk about, okay, Cheryl, you are ES, so you seem to be motivated by leadership and helping and being able to use your leadership to help others. And then you have these attributes and these traits and these values. But your highest interests all have to do with, it seems like, using your body, using your hands, and you really love math and research. So, you know, what are some ways that you can be who you are, but yet do the kinds of things that you like to do? Some of that might be more hobby, like athletics, for example. But we could maybe look at a major that's kind of connected there. You know, is there a way of, I'm thinking about engineering or something that's more like civil engineering, or where I could be using those other interest qualities, and that I can ultimately be helping somebody, because that's what S people want to do. So I'm just kind of talking off the top of my head here, but the conversations are quite lovely and quite interesting, and it's really through the relationship you have with the client in the interpretation where the magic happens and where the answers happen. So they might not be ready for making a decision. What we need to do is to figure out how the pieces fit for them.
Okay, thank you. A question from Deanna. Are the motivator combination phrases listed anywhere as general reference?
You know, they're only available in the interpretive report. However, in Where Do I Go Next, every single theme page has at least 3 core motivators for them. So you could also kind of slice and dice and create your own using the Where Do I Go Next booklet.
Okay, thank you. And Valerie asks, you mentioned that the OSs can be scored at a later time on the iStartStrong. What is the process for rescoring, and is there an additional cost?
Great. I'll answer something really quickly, and then I'm going to hand it over to my CPP friends. So just to reiterate, when you take the strong, it's the only strong. And then as a practitioner, you decide which report you want to run. And depending on the report you run, that costs something. So you would be generating the iStartStrong initially. It is a report. The person's information on how they took the strong lives on in your system. So then you would re-access that to run a different report. Jack?
Yes, thank you, Cheryl. So that's it exactly. You can obviously generate any strong report from the iStartStrong results. One thing that often trips up individuals who are using the Skills One site, when you go to generate the report, when you go to generate the report, you have to select an assessment from which the report is being generated. And oftentimes people, since they're going to be generating a strong college profile, for example, they'll just default to the strong assessment as the assessment of choice. But you do still need to select the iStartStrong as the assessment, and then you will be able to then proceed to the strong college profile, for example. That is something that often trips people up, so I wanted to highlight that. Thank you.
And there is a separate cost every time you pull down a different report for the result.
That is
that
correct. That is correct. If you're running if you start off with the iStartStrong, and then the student generates his or her results, you're charged your inventory is decremented for the iStartStrong, and then in turn, if you use those results to then generate a strong college profile, for example, once you generate the strong college profile, that will then be decremented from your inventory as well. So each additional report you run you are going to be decrementing a report from your report inventory.
Right. But nobody has to retake the assessment. The data lives in the system.
That's correct.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Well, thank you both. Chloe asks, or she mentions, I'm a career counselor at a community college, and one thing I run into is that some students are still undecided about career path, even after the strong and MBTI career report. Or sometimes a returning adult student has already worked in occupations that are within their strongest areas of interest, but they were not happy and want a different career. How would you follow up with these people?
Well, I know you're not there. I can't ask you the question directly, so I guess I'll just speak hypothetically. One is, we want to make sure that the Myers-Briggs and the Strong have had full interpretations. Just running the career report that combines the two, that gives you a peek at the overlap. It doesn't allow you to do interpretations of the separate instruments. So handing somebody a career report, and I'm not implying that this is what this person is doing, so I'm just talking out loud here. Just handing them a career report that shows the overlap, that's not really an interpretation. So that's one thing, is you want to make sure you actually have full interpretations of each instrument. And again, career assessments don't give us answers. They give us questions to ask and data to use to guide the questions of the interpretation. Sometimes people will see themselves popping up there again, the same kind of work they've been doing that's connecting to their interests. And she said about work environment, the personal style scales tell us how we like to work and learn. So sometimes it's the environment that's wrong, not the career. So for example, I don't know if any of you have had a chance to read the blogs that I've been doing for CPP, but I'm talking about an accountant who was very unhappy in his work. And the third blog will be coming out probably next week or so that kind of summarizes what happened with him. But the problem was not the work, it was the environment. And so that can be a piece of it, is trying to figure out what the part that was off. And the personal style scales, you can treat that like a filter. You can evaluate your current work environment or a prospective work environment against your style preferences. And you can sometimes find what's not fitting there. And often it's just the specific environment of that job as opposed to the actual career. So those are some thoughts.
Thank you. Ed asks, I realize the PSSs can change over time, but do the OSs and GOTs change over time?
Really, so Holland believed that the top 1 to 2 themes are really core to personality. So the general occupational theme page. And what that means is that your top 2 themes are most typically going to keep coming up as your top 2 themes as you retake it. They might switch positions. If that number 3 theme, though, is really going to float, that's going to be really new stuff that you're sticking your mitts in, new ideas, new people you're hanging out with. So that number 3 theme is the one that's going to move the most. And the top 2 themes on the general theme page, those actually correlate very strongly to heart of type. So it's really more intrinsic to who you are. Everything else on the strong is going to shift. It's going to be telling you where you are right now. So yes, the people you're similar to in terms of your occupational scales, your interests that are most compelling to you right now on the basic interests are going to shift, and the personal style scales will shift as well. So that's why we can say the strong is about where you are right now, and that's why it's such an exciting and important instrument.
Thank you. How do you suggest we show clients the hexagon, and how do we best explain the correlation to their results, Michelle asked?
Great. I always start an interpretation, whether it's a group one or an individual one, with the hexagon. So actually just drawing it on the whiteboard or having a handout. There's a hexagon in the back of the Where Do I Go Next booklet, so it doesn't really matter what hexagon you're using. But you want to orient people to the hexagon to help them understand what those themes mean and how they can show up in interests or in work or in personality. And then to make sure they understand that adjacent themes or touching themes naturally share qualities in common, and opposing themes are much more unique. So I always do it at the front because I call it kind of the language of the hexagon, because that language is used throughout the strong on all the scales but the personal style scales. So I do want to make sure people are comfortable with those terms beforehand. And I even recommend, if you have a chance, getting people comfortable with the hexagon before they even take the strong, because that's going to help make their results clearer and more differentiated. So less scores that are all similar or flat.
Thanks. Wendy asked, can you repeat what you said about the college profile and what population to use it with? I think I heard you say with high school students, but I was wondering if she misunderstood.
No, thanks for asking. So high school juniors and seniors that are college bound would be the earliest to use the college profile. And then I would use it up through college students who are still undecided, undeclared, so they don't have a major yet. That typically is going to be your freshman, sophomore group in college. Once they've decided or declared a major, I would not use the college profile. And for high school students younger than a junior, I would use the high school profile. Hope that helps.
Yes. Andre asked, can you share an example of the strong being successfully incorporated into a constructivist or narrative career counseling setting?
Well, I think the strong, the strong is such a, it's an empirical data instrument, but it is the conversation that comes out of the strong that is where the magic happens. We don't just hand report and say, these are your scores and blah, blah, blah. It's always, tell me about this. How does this sound to you? Can you give me an example of this? How might these interests be showing up in your life? And they might, I don't know, there's so many ways to launch questions that come from the strong. And we just need to keep reminding ourselves that the client is the local expert. All we get is the information that's either lining up or not lining up, and we get curious about all of it. And so I can really see the strong being a launching pad for the narrative experience, a narrative process with the client. There's so much food for thought. There's so many things to reflect upon. So it's a very exciting instrument in that it's 100% empirically based, but it's all about the client conversation.
Thank you. In career services, we try to align our services with academic advising, which is the first insight we have into what a student may choose to be. We see the strong as a beneficial tool. As students develop, would you suggest taking the strong several times during their academic career? Crystal asks.
Absolutely, absolutely. One model that I am familiar with is using the strong in academic advising as an intake process, and it might be the iStart initially, because whether the academic advisors don't have enough time to do a full 45-minute to an hour interpretation, or it's a large group sort of process. But the iStart can be a nice way for people just to kind of tap in with where they are as they're beginning. But as they're trying out classes, trying out activities, trying out student groups, their interests are going to solidify. And so retaking the strong, maybe if they take it at the beginning of their freshman year, or maybe winter or spring term of their freshman year, and then taking it again toward the end of their sophomore year as many folks are declaring their major, that would be a good interval. Or taking it in the first 2 years and then taking it again toward the end of your junior year would be great to kind of see how they're orienting themselves as they're moving towards the world of work as the next stop, or graduate school as the next stop. So it'd be a really great longitudinal study on for schools to do over time, their own kind of test retest sort of process.
All right. Can you shed light on why the bartender occupation was added into the strong?
Yeah, you know, I am not, I don't work for CPP, and I'm not on the research team, so I'm not really sure if it was access to that as an occupational group, ready access for the research, also the number of people that are in bartending, and the explosive nature of that as a legitimate career. So I don't really know how that particular occupation was chosen. Do you folks at CPP have any information from research on that particular one?
You know, Cheryl, I really don't. I just know that, you know, it would not have been included if the data did not support that.
Right.
And like I said, it is all empirically derived, so that was the reason that it was included. But I mean, ultimately, I think that it was included because you hear there's so many people working in the service industry now, and you know, specifically bartending. I think there's also an element of, you know, there's the mixologist aspect of bartending as well, which right. I think was one of the reasons why that was really sort of brought into the strong. Mm-hmm. That's really the only insights I have, though. I apologize.
Yeah. Thanks for the question, though.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you. Leslie would like a little more clarification. If I'm understanding correctly, the college profile is only used with high schoolers and undeclared college students. Would you use the college profile for returning adults or retirees?
The purpose of the college profile is to help the individual explore college majors or programs of study. So regardless of age, if that is the quandary or the question or the focus of the session, it would make sense. So, but if it's a retiree looking at what comes next, I would not use the college profile. But if it's a returning adult student who's looking at picking their major and going to school, certainly, yeah. So it's not so much about the age, so that's a good point. It's really about the focus of the conversation is looking at majors. I hope that helps.
Yes, and we have time for one more question. How is the theme code for occupational scales generated? Do they change based on the client's responses? We have worked with students that each they had the same occupational listing, but the theme code was different.
Mm-hmm. The theme code would be different if they were different gendered clients or different identified gender clients. If it were two female clients, the occupational scales are going to have the same code to them. The occupational scales are coded by the prevailing general theme codes of the people in those occupational samples. So the general occupational theme scales have been evaluated of the people in the occupational samples, and the prevailing themes are the ones that appear as the coding for the occupational title. There's a lot more to that one, but that's a summary of how it happens.
All right, thank you. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but again, we thank all of you for attending and for asking so many excellent questions. Thank you as well, Cheryl, for being with us to share your knowledge and expertise today. We ask and invite you to visit cpp.com/askanexpert for future Ask an Expert webinars and to find all of our previously recorded webinars, as well as this one here in the next week. Thank you again for attending and have a wonderful day.